You're hiding inside your home when you hear the sound no woman in the ancient East wanted to hear, the distant roar of Assyrian war drums. The ground trembles, smoke rises on the horizon. The Lion King's army has surrounded your city. And from this moment on, your destiny no longer belongs to you. What happens to you depends on an ancient and relentless law, a law that turned women into war trophies. Stay until the end to discover what the most feared fate of all was. The Assyrians were the most feared empire in the ancient East, not by chance. They built their reputation on a clear strategy, spreading terror. While other empires conquered by force alone, the Assyrians conquered through fear as well. Before they even arrived, cities would already tremble, because everyone knew what came after an Assyrian victory. Public impalements, mass deportations, entire cities wiped off the map. But there's a side to the story that's even darker and almost nobody talks about. What happened to the women of conquered cities? And this is where the so-called Law of the Lion King comes in, a set of royal decrees that define the fate of every captured person, especially women. Because in the Assyrian Empire, women were treated as part of the spoils of war, as objects, as property of the king. And what you're going to see in this video isn't fiction. It's history, documented on clay tablets, palace reliefs, and scribal records. I'm going to show you the possible fates, from the best-case scenario to the worst. And I guarantee you, none of them were good. Picture the scene. Your city has been under siege for days, maybe weeks. The Assyrians are in no hurry. They know time plays in their favor. Outside the walls, you hear the drums, constantly, day and night. It's a psychological warfare technique, breaking morale before breaking the gates. Then the visual signals begin. Rising smoke, bodies of local soldiers displayed on the walls, sometimes impaled near the gates. All of this serves one purpose, making you give up before you even fight. And it works, because the Assyrians had centuries of experience in destroying the will to resist. When the gates finally give way, chaos takes over. Soldiers invade the streets, houses are looted, families are separated, and all the women of the city are gathered, usually in the central square. The men are separated, some executed quickly to intimidate, others taken for forced labor. But the women go through something different. They are classified, and this classification decides everything. Where you go, what you'll do, whether you'll survive. Because in the Assyrian system, each woman had a value, and that value determined her fate. The first category was the noble women, daughters of defeated kings, wives of local leaders, elite women. These were treated as political trophies, not because the Assyrians were gentle with them, but because they had strategic value. Some were sent directly to the royal harem, others used as diplomatic currency, married off to Assyrian generals to seal alliances, or kept as hostages to ensure their fathers or brothers wouldn't rebel. But make no mistake, even being noble, they lost everything: their status, their freedom, their identity. Inside the royal harem, there were deadly rivalries, disputes for attention, severe punishments for any slip-up. And the king had total power over them, life and death, at any moment. The second category was young women considered valuable, usually between 15 and 25 years old. These were marked, literally, with ink on their arms or faces. Some received a metal seal pierced into their skin, a permanent marking. They were destined for what the Assyrians called temple service. And here the story gets murky, because the records don't make clear exactly what this service meant, but we know it involved rituals, forced labor, and a life with no possibility of return. The third category, was common women, the majority, mothers, workers, women without special status. These were distributed as domestic slaves, sent to Assyrian officers' homes, or placed on long forced marches to other cities of the empire. Many worked in agricultural fields, others at military posts, and the nature of this work varied, but it was rarely just domestic. These deportation marches were brutal, women chained by the neck, daughters torn from their mothers' arms, small children tied by the wrists and dragged for days. The elderly who couldn't keep up the pace were left to die along the way. And this wasn't gratuitous cruelty, it was strategy, spreading panic, making neighboring kingdoms know exactly what awaited them if they resisted. And the fourth category, the most feared, those who resisted, those who tried to escape, those who refused to obey. For these, the law of the Lion King was clear: public punishment at the city gates in front of everyone. Because the Assyrians understood that terror only works if it's visible, if it's remembered, if it's repeated as a warning. Now let's enter the place many considered the worst fate of all, the royal harem. Because from the outside it seemed like privilege, women living in the palace, close to power. But inside it was a silent prison with strict rules, severe punishments, and no way out. The harem was guarded by eunuchs, men castrated specifically for this job. They controlled everything: who entered, who left, who had permission to speak. Because inside the harem, silence was mandatory. Conversations were monitored, friendships watched. Any sign of conspiracy was crushed immediately. And foreign women went through a process of forced re-education, learning Assyrian customs, forgetting their native language, adopting new names. Some resisted and paid dearly, because inside the harem there was also hierarchy. The king's favorites had power over the others, and they used that power. Disputes turned into accusations, accusations into punishments, and punishments could mean disappearance. Because yes, women disappeared from the harem, and nobody talked about it. Officially, they were transferred or sent to distant temples, but records show that many simply vanished from the documents, without explanation, without trace. And the king decided everything: who stayed close to him, who was forgotten in the back of the palace, who was sent to forced labor, who had children, and who wouldn't have that chance. The bodies of the harem women didn't belong to them. They belonged to the empire and to the whim of the man who commanded it.
And everything I've shown you so far wasn't arbitrary. It was written, codified, carved on clay tablets that have survived to this day. The so-called Law of the Lion King is a collection of royal decrees that regulated life in the empire, and especially the lives of women. One of the decrees stated, "The wife of a defeated enemy belongs to the king." Simple as that. It didn't matter if she was married, if she had children, if she had a life. At the moment of defeat, she became royal property. Another decree established daughters of defeated soldiers are property of the officers. They were distributed as rewards, as war prizes, and the officers could do whatever they wanted with them. Yet another said, no captured woman may return to her city. Even if the war ended, even if there was a peace agreement, they were lost forever, cut off from their roots, from their families, from everything they knew. And there was a specific rule that chilled the blood. The foreign woman who disobeys will be punished in the public square. This included everything from minor infractions to escape attempts, and the punishment was always exemplary, because the law didn't just serve to control, it served to terrorize. These decrees transformed bodies into an extension of military power. Women weren't seen as human beings, they were resources, tools, symbols of domination, and the law made this very clear. So, if you were a woman captured by the Assyrian army, what would be your fate? I'll summarize the 6 possible scenarios, from what the Assyrians considered the best to the worst. First, royal concubine. You would be taken to the harem. You would live in the palace. You would have food, relative protection, but you would lose your freedom, your identity, and any control over your life. You would be constantly watched, eternally in dispute with other women, and dependent on the king's mood. Second, domestic servant. You would be sent to an Assyrian officer's or bureaucrat's home. You would work, cleaning, cooking, caring for children. Perhaps you would have less brutal treatment, but you would still be property, without rights, without choices. Third, forced agricultural labor. You would be deported to a distant region of the empire. You would work in the fields, sun up to sundown, under constant supervision, minimal food, hard and short life. Fourth, military post servant. You would be sent to camps or fortresses, and here the work was rarely just domestic. You were expected to serve the soldiers in every way, without protection, without dignity. Fifth, temple servant. You would be marked and sent for religious rituals. What exactly this meant, the records don't fully clarify, but we know it involved total submission, and that these women were rarely seen again. Sixth, public punishment or disappearance. If you resisted, if you tried to escape, if you disobeyed, your fate would be sealed publicly as a warning, as propaganda of terror, and your name would be erased. All these fates lead to the same conclusion. In the Assyrian Empire, the female body was seen as part of the spoils of war, not as human life, not as a person, as an object, as a tool of domination, as a message to enemies. The Assyrians called themselves the chosen ones of Ashur. They believed their god had ordered them to dominate the world. And for them, terror wasn't cruelty. It was public policy. It was strategy. It was the most efficient way to control a giant empire with limited resources. The bodies of captured women were tools of this strategy. Each deportation was a demonstration of power. Each harem, a symbol of domination. Each public punishment, a warning. And the law of the Lion King shaped centuries of fear in the ancient East. Entire cities would surrender just from hearing that the Assyrian army was on its way, because everyone knew. They knew what happened next. And the worst part? This wasn't the exception. It was the rule. For hundreds of years, through generations of kings, the system continued, refined, perfected, documented, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Today, we look at these records and feel a deep discomfort, because these are real stories of real people, women who had dreams, families, lives, and who had everything torn away the moment the war drums began to sound. If this video made you see the Assyrian Empire in a different way, leave a like down below. This type of content takes a lot of time to research and produce, so your interaction really helps to keep bringing stories like this. And if you want more videos about the dark sides of ancient history, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming.